And we're back with another jttv. Well, my friend Brandon, last episode it ended with him in here, but he was stupid enough, brave enough, definitely not brave. He went in there again. He can't climb over there because his leg is hurt. And so yeah, say your last words. Not much of a word, is it? Okay, so now I gotta find out how to get him out of there. It's hero time. Only thing is, I can't fucking fly. This is gonna be harder than I thought. Okay. Now, I'm fucked. Just watch from there, okay? Dogs. Oh. Ow. Oh. No. Yeah. Oh. Hey, Ty. Ah. I don't know if the camera is on. I didn't think so either. Could you put it down at me for a second just so you can see me?
There you are.
Goodbye, cool.
I'm so cruel to him.
I will get you. No, don't throw it. Don't throw it. I will get you.
Bullcrap! My leg never actually hurt.
Ow! Like, ah!
Burn in hell.
Don't bite, don't bite there.
Okay, this is getting a little violent. Okay. Should I stop it?
Yes, please.
Okay. Bye, and bye from Ty.